Welcome, dear viewers, to another rendition of Ethan Ranting. Tonight, I'm going to talk about homosexuality. We were discussing this earlier in TRT chat. By we, I mean myself and someone who I assume is Zoc Jr. He said, homosexuality is a mental illness. I don't understand that. I understand how a Christian could say that it's morally wrong because it goes against the Bible, or that it's unnatural, but I don't understand how it could be considered a mental illness. Now, it's true that homosexuals have a smaller hypothalamus. Homosexual males have smaller hypothalamus than heterosexual males, so the neurology is different. It's also been determined that there is a genetic factor involved. So, is it a mental illness or a genetic mutation? If it's a genetic mutation, is it like cancer? Well, we're not born with cancer. You know, some people are more genetically predisposed to it. What if people are more genetically predisposed to homosexuality? Not that they necessarily will become them. I can't really cover a whole topic on homosexuality. I just wanted to give you that. And I'm by no means an expert on sex, although I do know how to flick a bean. I wanted to talk about sexuality in general. I've been thinking about writing a book about hips and everything about the hips. And that might seem strange, and how could you write a book about hips? Well, it would be possible for sure, and I think I might be able to make it an interesting read. Of course, I'll have to do a lot of research. I do not claim to be an expert on hips, but maybe I could become one during the researching of this book. One interesting fact about hips is if someone's hips tilt backward, that is, if they stick their ass up in the air, it indicates that they are, well, not necessarily sex addicts, but that they crave sex and that they crave orgasm and that they can never quite get it. You know, they're never quite satisfied with it and they always want more sex. That might sound like a sex addict, but I'm not explaining it well. The sexual attitude of someone who tilts their pelvis back is one who wants to get a release from sex but can't. They might think that they can, but they can't quite get the full. We've all probably experienced that once or twice, maybe not, you know. It was years before I had a full body orgasm from sex. Only happened one time. Whole body was quivering. It was incredible. And then people that have their hips tilted forward tend to be sexually repressed in the aspect that they don't really enjoy sex, that they don't really want sex. Whereas someone whose pelvis is level, someone who distributes the weight on their feet evenly, can enjoy sex but don't crave it, or at least don't have an unhealthy fixation on it. I do. And wasn't that prudent? And there's a lot more to the hips. Like I said, I've been thinking about writing a book, and I've got some chapter titles that are a work in progress. You know, I think if I write articles for each chapter, or on the topic of each chapter, I can combine and edit the articles so that they fit the chapter titles. And my chapter titles so far are Hip Tension, which is what I just mentioned, Kundalini, the Anima and the Animus. The Anima and the Animus, and I might be butchering this, are the, for males it's I think, I'm not sure which is which, honestly. I'm not really familiar with Carl Jung, who used these phrases to describe, you know, every man has an inner woman and every woman has an inner man. The subconscious mind, or the subconscious expression of a male, is personified as a woman, and vice versa. So as we delve deeper into our dreams, and as we self-actualize, or as our real self and our ideal self come closer and closer together, we come to find that the ideal self communicates with us. The ideal self is an aspect of our consciousness. It's real. It's not just some fantasy. It's part of our consciousness, and it speaks with us in our dreams. Sort of like the left brain talking to the right brain. But that's not what the Anima and the Animus is, really. And so, by learning to lucid dream, or simply observing, remembering, and recording your dreams, you can begin to communicate with your Anima or your Animus. I'd like to dedicate another chapter to hip exercises. Just ways to stay loose and to stay free. Ways that you can move your body so that the sexual energy flows. And if you don't like the term sexual energy, you can just consider that muscular tension puts a strain or puts a burden on your nervous system. And if you could sit with perfect posture, and if you could release the tension, which you may or may not feel, all of a sudden your nervous system would be free to do more interesting things than keeping you locked in this goofy position. Pelvic pathology includes diseases in the pelvis and possible emotional roots to those causes. Like anally retentive people might be more likely to have rectal cancer or diverticulitis. Where, anyway, I say this because I think it's right, and I've been operating on these assumptions and they seem accurate, but I don't have evidence to back it up. I have books that have evidence to back it up, which is why I have faith in the material, but I don't have first-hand evidence or research to back it up, which is why I would like to write this book so that I can say with certainty, you know, I can demonstrate this and prove it to you. For the time being, if you're interested in this sort of thing, you'll have to look into it yourself. Although if you'd like, I could recommend some books that might shed some light on the topic. Another chapter I'd like to write is Evolution into Upright Beings. transition from animals walking on all fours to beginning to stand upright is a major shift in mammals. You know, birds walk on 2 feet, sure, but when primates began to walk upright, they began to construct tools. And in nature we see that some birds and some other animals use tools, okay. But if you put that bird in an environment that it wasn't evolved into, or an environment that it wasn't evolved into, would it adapt? I have to presume that a primate would be much more adaptable in a new environment than a bird would. A primate would be more capable of constructing tools useful to an unfamiliar environment than a bird. I don't have research on that, I'll admit it, but every point in our evolution as earthly organisms have been significant in one aspect or another, because it affects, you know, the transition from sea to land exists within our physiology. It exists within our nervous system as a response to our environment. You know, we might not be, our ability to swim, for example, might not be very relevant to us on a survival level or on any level, but the reason it's there is not because humans needed to learn how to swim, it's because predecessors of humans needed to learn how to swim. And when humans learned how to swim, the entire history of our evolution played a part in our ability to swim. And that's the case with every other stage of evolution. But something that makes us uniquely human is the transition of the front mobilizers, you know, the front legs or the hands or the wings. In primates, and I suppose it's rare in other species, but not non-existent, the hands or the front legs transitioned into makers of tools, constructors of environments, making the world around us, changing the world around us, whereas animals before upright species simply survived in their environments and adapted to their environments. The upright species began adapting the environment to them. And you see a squirrel holds a nut with its hands, so that's an exception to the rule. Obviously, we didn't evolve in a straight line. We evolved in all sorts of directions. So that's something I'd like to look into. It's something I don't understand very well, and I'd like to have a more clear picture of how species on planet Earth evolved and how that affects us. What this has to do with hips, obviously, is a 90-degree change, which is a pretty big change. Sexuality in the Tarot is another thing that I'd like to cover, but I don't really know enough about that to educate you. But it's interesting, so if that turns you on, look into it. The Thoth Tarot, Portable Darkness, and Aleister Crowley Reader is a book that has some interesting commentaries and excerpts from Crowley's work. And they have a section for 3 cards it has a section for 3 cards: the Fool, the Devil, and the Hermit, which are all related to sexuality, and I would like to delve deeper into the meanings of those cards. Another thing, I may have mentioned this in a previous video that I wonder about, and I suppose I'll end the video with this. Transgenders. It used to be that there is the common perception of sexuality was polar, straight, gay. And then the mainstream has begun to accept 3 identities, or 4, 3 being straight, gay, bipolar, well, that'll come up, but bisexual. And then the transgenders came into it, which I guess would be the 4th qualification. The question is a man that becomes woman a man or a woman? Is there such thing as woman with a penis? Now, I'm not going to try to argue for any particular sexual preference. I'm simply raising the question: if there's more to sexuality than straight and gay, then how diverse is sexuality? I suppose it's different to every individual, but we have gays with all sorts of different sexual attitudes: dominant, submissive, in between, dominant bottom, submissive tops. So it's not like gay people like it in the ass, and it's not like straight people do it missionary all the time. And there's such a plethora of sexual preference. And then beyond that, we have the transgenders. We have the transgenders that prefer to have a penis, that prefer not to. I'm not very familiar with women to men, women that are men become men. I'm not even sure if it's possible to construct a satisfying penis. I think I heard somewhere that they can get like mini dicks, little dicks, but who wants that? There's an interesting picture I saw that had, what's his name? Her name? Buck Angel. Chick that looks like a biker, looks like a dude, like top to bottom. Shaved head, handlebar mustache, big muscles. Looks like a dude through and through, but he's got a pussy. A natural pussy. He was born a woman. He looks like a man except for that. And then there is a picture of your typical transvestite with implants and a penis. And the question was raised, which one do you find more attractive? And I'm not sure if it's possible to be completely turned off by both of those pictures. Even if you're grossed out by transvestites, some of them are pretty convincing and they're pretty hot from the waist up. So if someone is being true to themselves and they're being emotionally honest with themselves, does there exist a person that isn't even slightly turned on by either of those 2 pictures? I'm not sure. But it does, whether or not it's valid or the truth, that you'd have to be more, you'd have to have a preference of one of those 2 pictures. I think it stands that that sexuality is more than polar. It's more than linear. It's more than binary. It's more than 2 options. Well, if you have more than linear, then you have a radial wheel, but I think it goes beyond that to more of a spherical dynamic. When you consider multiple people, how I feel about this and how I feel about that, and what my sexual preference is, and how I'm turned off by that, and then you add other people in the equation, how they feel about you feeling about them. Then you add another dimension, and we enter a fourth dimension where you can't even map it out on a matrix. So it's beyond comprehension for me. I wonder if we'll ever be able to piece it together, and if we'll ever be able to, make a philosophical proof, or perhaps even a scientific proof, that sexuality is infinite. I suppose that's enough. Thank you for listening. Have a great night.